All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dance Studio Network podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Chatham, and joining me today on this lovely hot day in Texas, we have a talented dancer who I've got to know over this last year pretty well, and her name is Hannah Fisher. So give it up for Hannah Fisher is in the house today, and we just wanted to kind of bring you in and talk about your journey through dance, things that we want parents to know, things that, kids should know growing up in it. I personally know you're really connected to all the community around. You got a good voice in the community of dance, and now is your chance, your platform to share some of that. So starting out with the fun stuff, when did you get started in dance? How old were you?
Yeah, so I'll kind of start there. My mom, put me in dance when I was young. I was about 2 or 3 years old. Just like a typical kid, likes to move around and jumping around the house and has a lot of energy. And rather than the sports route right away, just figured like dance was probably the better bet. She did that growing up, and obviously just, thought it would be good for me too. So I would say right off the bat, it was just not really my jam. Like I didn't love the structure and the leotards and the tights and all that stuff. I was kind of like, I don't know if this is my thing. It took me quite a while to kind of get to the point where I was enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And then after about 8 years, we made it to 8 years.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of at the point where I was outgrowing my studio. I started out in a really simple, just like community center style studio. And so I actually transitioned to a more, professional, legitimate studio, I would say. Yeah. And then from there, was introduced to a lot more ballet, a lot more just classical training, and immediately fell in love with it. I was really surrounded by a lot of people who were just way better than me. And it was so fun because rather than being discouraged, I was like, wow, I could be like that when I'm older. Yeah. And that was the point where I really started to just fall in love with dance. And I was taking class like 3-4 days a week. I had gotten asked to join the competitive team, which at the time, like, just wasn't really a reality for my family financially. And, we lived far away, and I had other extracurricular activities. It just wasn't really feasible, but it was something I wanted so bad. And I was already at the studio, full time, it felt like. Yeah. And so I started to love it and just really enjoy the art of performing. Like, I thought it was so fun. Yeah. And by the time that I was done with high school, I mean, there was so much growth in between those years. But then by the time I was done with high school, all my competitive friends were super, super burnt out on dance. Meanwhile, I was just getting started, and I was like, how do I continue this journey? I know you can, like, I know there's people out there, doing dance professionally, but I don't know what that looks like. How do I even start that process? And so I knew I wanted to continue it into higher education. I just wasn't sure how to go about that.
How to go that route.
Yeah.
Well, so I love it. And I know like that was like the toll road version of like beginner to all the way through high school. I want to break down kind of like those younger years because you kind of pointed out something I love for parents to hear and understand. Like, it's okay if your kid's not running, 100% trying to grind themselves to be the best immediately. Like, you got to fall in love with this thing.
Absolutely.
And it is a very common statistic that the average age of burnout is 13, 14 years old. That's national data. You can look it up. Yeah. For me, I hate that. I really, really hate that. It's sad. I mean, to me, that says that we're failing our students if we accept that statistic. It doesn't mean that kids can, they can't change or go a different route. But if you're doing what you love and you burn out, you're missing all the other really great years ahead. So, so when you were young, so how old were you? Like, what age did you actually start at? Like 5?
I want to say no. It was. I guess it was 3 technically.
Okay.
But it's just those little combo classes
in the pre-classes.
Yeah.
And so you kind of got connected through there. And then when did you know like you wanted to do competitive dance? Like, how old were you?
It was definitely when I had switched studios. So that was, I guess, back in 2008. Okay. So I would have been like 11 years old. And it was within that first year because
making me feel old now. 2008. That's okay.
I'm like, whoa, that's back to recession. Yeah, seriously. I guess it was at 2008 because within that first year, I was just exposed to so many new people and new styles. And I was like,
so
whoa.
How old were you again? I missed that.
I was 11.
Yeah, 11. Okay. Yeah. So 11 years old, because that's good for people to understand.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're like, oh, my kid's 9, 10. I know they're already behind. And it's like, well.
Yeah. But what does that really mean,
Exactly. Behind? Yeah, what is behind? Some kids who press too hard burn out, and then they never see the light of day of what they could accomplish.
Yeah.
So I love that you chase the passion first.
Yeah. Well, the funny part about that is I guess probably around like 6 or 7, I did have a moment where I wanted to quit. I remember telling my mom, like, it was just those years of being so sick of the leotard and the tights and all the things and the bun. And I had so much more hair, if you can believe, than I have now when I was a kid. And it was just kind of a pain sometimes, you know, to go to dance. And I liked my friends there, but I didn't love dance class right away. And I actually remember it like vividly. At one point I had really told my mom, like, I just want to quit, Mom. Like, I'm over it. I don't want to do it. And she's the type of mom who was like, well, let's talk about it at the end of the year, because we don't quit commitments halfway through the year.
That's good.
And by the time that year was over, I had different feelings about it, of course. So, but like how, like, much of a blessing that she didn't just let me, you know, quit before I even really started, or else we wouldn't be here
I think it's
today.
kind of like a dual-edged sword here. You know, don't be so quick to let your kid take a million things, but don't be so quick to let them drop things that they've committed to. You know, and that's that balance. Because, you know, that teeter-totter, like, you go too much one direction, you're gonna become unbalanced, and that's what we don't want for our students. So we fight really hard at our studios to make sure, like, one, you know, our theme is discover the artist within. We want you to love it, right? If you love what you're doing, you're going to want to work at it. And that's ethics that will carry with you into your adulthood. So it's not just work hard because it only makes you feel good. And obviously, as an adult dancer, like, when is it like, well, it's just, it always feels good. That's like a really false imagination to have. So it's kind of like, let's get to the nitty gritty, you know, like, as a kid, you're learning, you know, life skills of how to apply yourself, and you're doing it through dance, something that you love. And the more you love it, the harder it becomes. But the harder it becomes, the more, like, better you become.
It's sweeter. You know?
It's kind of like this push-pull method. You want to push through a little bit, but sometimes you need to pull back and make sure you're not just trying to hammer down the door to get to where you want. Otherwise, you end up like, you know, friends, you know, that quit. And it saddens my heart to see people like, hey, change dance because you want to go do band or want to go do something else. But like, to leave dance because you were oversaturated, I think this is the day and age that, like, we need to make sure our parents are making those great decisions. You know, that, you know, it's kind of like the internet. Like, you could sit in Instagram and be like, wow, I get lots of inspiration. But if you sit in there too long, you're oversaturated. So
absolutely.
Anyways, back to your journey. You know, all right. So you were 11, you got into the competitive. Did you dance all the way through high school, you said?
Yeah. So despite not pursuing the competitive route, I still was basically in class. All the people I was in class with, I got to the point where I was, you know, in all the advanced classes. And so all of my friends in class were dancing competitively. And so even though I wasn't, that pushed me to, you know, work harder. And I think it was just kind of this chase, like this cat and mouse chase thing I wanted for so long. I was like, I love dance, but I don't quite know how to do more of it if I'm not going to be, you know, competing or whatever. So that was kind of a journey that I like to consider myself sort of like the underdog, because instead of just moving on after high school, like I chose to pursue it because I was still hungry for more. You know?
I think, and again, that's a good point. Like, you want to keep that hunger alive. And too often, you know, some kids have a natural ability and it carries them, you know, in those early years. But I tend to see the ones that are committed to the discipline are the ones who outlast. And so it's kind of like, how sad would it be to compare yourself prematurely? And then even afterwards, like, there is no reason to compare. It's just understanding your journey.
Right. Well, as you just heard, it took me years to get to that point where, and part of it's a maturity thing too, because I used to really not be super fond of ballet. And I have students now who take class, they're like, I just don't really like ballet, but they have to do it if they're on team or something like that. And it's funny because as they get older, just like me, a lot of the times it's like, oh, you get to a point where you start to love ballet, and it's a maturity thing. A lot of times. So.
Well, and that's kind of like that seasonality. And with artistry, it, you know, we're such a fast-paced generation. We want everything right away, super fast.
Now,
like, give it to me. And it's like, it takes time for you not only to master the technique, but the skill to perform it. And there's a difference between showing me technique and performing a number, right? You know, and that's what I love about competition is, like, it really forces you to kind of hone in your skill set to get on that stage. You're representing before those judges, you know, what it is you're bringing, but you've got to be really dialed in and focused. But what I would add is, don't wait for the stage. Bring that intentionality into the classroom.
Oh yeah.
Right?
As an instructor now, that's definitely something that I push, because some of these kids, you know, post-COVID, they are just not even aware of their face, like they don't know how to use their expressions.
That's
and
true.
they're, after wearing a mask for however long we did, like they forget to smile in class.
Is it because you're just so used to being like covered up?
They just don't have to think about it. And so sometimes
I'm really happy right now.
Yeah, but are you?
Tell it to your face.
Yeah, so I try to, especially my older girls, or if I know that, these kids are on team, like I'm going to push them a little bit harder because they do have to eventually get to the point where they're performance ready. And it doesn't just happen overnight. Like we have to practice that in class.
Yes.
So I give them the chance to like, hey, where's your performance? Like that was beautiful dancing, but what was your face doing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, and it's like, you're sharing a story.
Yeah.
Anytime you put a dance together, you're sharing a story with your expression.
Yeah.
And so I always encourage people like, make it your own, like make whatever dance you're doing so that it's so a reflection of you that whenever I hear that song, I'm going to think of you now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, like that's that connection that takes years of maturity and discipline and time, that it doesn't just happen in the first year of competing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. It's like I want to believe you when I watch you dance. Let me believe you.
Like this song, like you really you took the song, you made it your own.
Yeah.
And it's funny is like, you ever been to a wedding with other dancers?
Yes. Oh yes.
And what happens when a song y'all dance to comes up?
It's the biggest party you've ever seen.
It's like the choreography comes right back.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like it's fun to watch. It's just, it's in there. So, adding the expression and the enjoyment of it, it pairs it together to make something beautiful. And, what would be some other advice for, competitive dancers that are maybe just say in the high school range, keeping them going?
Well, I guess like for high school kids, they are kind of at the point where, they've had years of serious training. Like they are probably very advanced, right? At that point, or at least a lot of these kids at the studios that I've connected with, and they're not. This is not their first rodeo, basically. And I think sometimes they can get to the point where they are just hearing the same corrections over and over, or they're feeling like they're not really getting anything out of it. But I would just encourage, like even when you're in class, like if you're in the back of the room, like doesn't matter, just still show up as if you were right there in front. If you were the only person in class, like you have to, like the extent of what you're going to get out of it is what is truly what you put into it.
Ooh,
and
that's good. If you want something great, you got to participate.
Yeah, I know it's so simple, but it's true. It's like, I think we go into it sometimes with the mindset, the kids go into it with the mindset of like, well, I've done this 5 million times. Like I'm a senior in high school. What could I possibly, get out of this? Like I'm just kind of done with it. Yeah. And I'm like, what if this is like the breakthrough moment where you could learn something that's completely pivotal for you, but you're shutting yourself down to where you're going to block yourself from learning that thing. Like just always be the sponge, like always be the sponge, be open and willing to absorb whatever information is in front of you. Because honestly, like if you put 110% effort into those conventions, into those competition weekends, like that will fill your cup, like that, if you let it, that will fill your cup.
Yeah. So. And those are tiring weekends, like that's where you push yourself and you expand your capacity. Yeah. And I know, you're growing it as a kid,
right?
To build a capacity of everything that you're taking in. But I love what you said, be the sponge, in the room. Because, a lot of times people see, someone's in the front and the person in the back's not being noticed. But as a dance teacher, you want to speak to that fallacy?
Well, if I see you in the back working really hard, there might be other people in the front, sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to draw my attention. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it's like, even in my classes, at the studio, like I have bigger classes sometimes and it's not always the person. And of course we do the whole switch lines thing, I love that. But even just when I'm watching groups go, I'm like, I'm not just staring at the person in the front. Like maybe I am right away, but then my attention will gravitate towards whoever is like giving it their all. Yeah. Even if you're the person in the back, if you're the shortest person in the room and you're in the back, I'm still going to look at you if you're giving me that effort,
Yeah. So. Well, and that's good. Cause like, it's, if you don't know this, like, I'm in the back, I'm not being looked after. And
it's not true.
It's not true. And I've even talked to like competitions where the directors of competitions, are like, look guys, we judge from the back to the front, not from the front to the back. So if you get a parent's like, I want my kid in the front, I'm like, it doesn't necessarily change the outcome of what it is now. We love to stardom. We love to, every kid needs to have those moments, in their life where they can be in the front and lead. However, if you're dancing competitively, those lines are judged from the back to the front.
Absolutely.
And so like, I want parents to really understand that. So when a choreographer is putting you, sometimes if there's a piece where you're in the back, that could be very beneficial to have a crucial leader there who can make sure the rest are following while you have others that are having their moments to shine up front, right?
100%.
Cool.
Yeah.
See, we're just kind of peeling back the layers here, but it's good. Not every parent's danced before, so they're not learning firsthand what these kids are learning. So. Yeah. Well, good. So, okay. And, these competition dancers are going to keep working. I love what you said, keep pushing that effort, bring it 110% because you're going to get out what you put in.
You'll be glad you did, basically.
Yeah. Well, and don't do it only when it feels good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Can't rely on our feelings for hard work because...
Can you say it one more for the people in the back?
Yeah, we can't rely on our feelings for hard work. I mean, if we only ever showed up with 110% when we felt like it would be like maybe once a week, twice a week.
Yeah, when do you feel 100? When do you actually feel that?
I would say it's rare.
It's rare, right?
For me, it's like maybe twice a month now, where I'm really feeling like I wake up, I'm ready to conquer the day. I could literally do anything like all day. That feeling, I do sometimes get that feeling even in my adult life of dancing, but it's very rare to the point where I would not even count on that, to go into rehearsal or to class or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's good, again, because, you've done so much dancing. You've been a part of so many groups, and, this is the stuff we want kids to understand. So, if you're struggling, you're like, man, I'm just not, feeling my best going into this, that's okay.
Yeah.
As adult professionals who dance in this career path, we feel that all the way, too.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you as a kid feel that? This is where the testing of what you're made of is done in a safe place.
Yeah.
Not in a career, not when you're on a professional stage under, the directorship and there's budgets involved and there's all kinds of time constraints, you're at your home studio, you should feel safe.
Yeah.
To be bold in those movements and also not be afraid when you make mistakes with your movement.
Yeah.
So
so true.
What would you say to the dancer, who's maybe the perfectionist dancer?
Oh man.
Because that's usually a ballet thing.
Yeah, I definitely think this is a good question for me because once I fell in love with ballet, I was like, oh, it's so specific and the technique is just, it's just this game of chasing perfection, knowing that you can never achieve it, but you're just trying to get as close as humanly possible. That's what you're doing, right? And after, years of being at my second studio that we did a big ballet every semester or every spring. And it was just the most fun thing because I got to watch the older girls and it was just such an experience, watching that perfection that I wanted to reach, but I was can never get there, but I want to get as close as I can. And it sometimes is a little bit of a love-hate relationship with ballet. It's it's so beautiful. It's so fun. But if you're not getting it, it can be really frustrating. I've been doing tendus and pliés and dégagés for over 20 years now. And guess what? I took class this morning and they still weren't perfect, But the thing is, I think you have to really stop, telling yourself that if you don't get here, then you failed, but rather it's the consistency. I haven't gotten here because I'm the most talented or the best performer or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the years and years and years of consistency. That's what it is,
This is the same common theme. Everybody I meet in this industry is I wasn't the greatest, I wasn't the best, but I loved it more than anybody. Yeah. And that's why I'm still here today and leading now as an adult. And to me, it really sums it up. You've got to really love it so that you're committed to the work of it. And anything that's beautiful in art, it's gonna require some sacrifice.
Oh, that's so true. I think people really get into this mindset of I can't be a professional dancer if I'm not this good and at the top, and there's only so much space here. And I'm like, no, if you're consistent enough, there's a spot for everyone. If you want to dance, there is a spot for you in this dance life, Yeah. And it doesn't require being the best or the this or the that. It requires consistency. That's it.
And that work ethic, it always outshines.
Yeah.
And if you're if you're an adult production and you're going, I've got a dancer who's, really great technically, but I can tell doesn't work well with others.
Bad attitude.
Not
a team player,
they're going to get skipped.
Yeah.
So your technique alone won't get you in the door as an adult dancer.
Yeah.
You've got to have that whole package deal.
A lot of times I would say, in my experience, when you're auditioning for companies or jobs or whatever it is, there's usually an interview portion as well. And so you might have, the best leaps and turns and all the things, but if you can't have a conversation or if you're, not confident when you're speaking or whatever it is, that might be the reason that they don't select you, even if you're a beautiful mover.
And that's like heartbreaking to hear,
Yeah.
right? But it's like something people need to understand.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like learning how to advocate for yourself, learning how to speak up, talk to your teachers. Like
Right.
if you need attention to something, like talk to the person who loves teaching you.
Yep.
The worst thing you can do, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like be a dancer and have all this passion and then go tell everybody but the person training you where you're struggling.
If they don't know, there's something wrong with that.
Right.
Because they're the best person they're in the best position to help you, basically, right? They should know before anyone. I think like for me, I'm thinking back to those times where I had struggles of like, ooh, what would I do if I, had an interview and I didn't know what to say or whatever.
Yeah.
I would go back to mentors and teachers that I knew would just give me the tough love and be like, this is exactly what you need to say.
Yeah.
Or this is how you need to present yourself or whatever. Like they would tell me, the truth about like this is something that's attainable, but they would just basically give me like a little heads up, and just kind of fill me in. So I think that just having like a group of people who are there for you regardless, like every person who's ever taught me, like back to day one, I still are connected with them in some way.
Ooh, that's
and
cool.
I love that, like if I'm having a problem or if I'm having a situation where I'm like, I don't know the answer to this, but so-and-so would know. Yeah. And I'm just probably going to send them a text and I'm going to ask them, like, hey, can you help me with this? Or I have this coming up, like, what can I do? So your teachers are not just there to teach you from Tuesdays from 4 to 5 p.m. ballet class, like whatever it is. They can be a resource outside, and we actually love to help, outside of class.
Well, and that's good for them to hear because, I think there's an honor in being a teacher that, a lot of this younger generation is learning.
Yep.
It looked different than it did 10, 20 years ago. Like a lot of, school systems and things, everything's changing so quickly, so fast. But in the dance studio realm, like you can have the same teacher for years. So like to have that compounded, vested interest into your life.
It's a mentorship, really.
That's not easy to replace.
Right.
So, there's a lot to be considered for somebody who shows up in your life as a dancer every day.
Yeah.
And I love that because again, same thing. That's why I love to hear it from the mouth of someone else. Like all the people I know in this industry are friends with their former mentors in some way or form. Or previous students they've even met, some of them decades ago, and they're like, yeah, we still connect and we still chat. And this is the philosophy we've really been preaching very strongly at our studio. Our network is, collaboration is key to consistency and success. Nobody has it all figured out, but together we can draw from each other's strengths to build something that's pretty awesome.
Well, that's so good. It goes back to just the community aspect of dance. Like I love the Dallas dance community. And I mean, obviously this is where I'm from. This is my home. So I'm kind of biased, but I think that it's just a good way to like continue growing because even if you're older like me, I'm inching towards 30 here. So
old. Oh my gosh.
Well, it definitely feels
in dancer language. It's getting older.
But anyways, it's been so fun to just stay connected with some of my, classmates from back in the day, people I went to college with, people that I met post college, but we've been friends for years now. And just the community aspect, like that is what keeps me loving dance. Like I love class and I love training and I like teaching and all these things, but it's just the community that's so special and close knit. Like that's what keeps me so grounded in dance because I know that no matter what's going on, like I have people that are there in my corner.
And that's, again, that becomes more rare as we kind of move forward in this, like technology age generation where most of our relationships are now connections through, social media apps, it's rare to sit down.
Yeah.
And like, hey, let's have a discussion. They're like, wait, what's going on? Is everything okay? You're like, yeah, I just want to do it the old fashioned way, face to face, directly at a table. Let's talk, and that's becoming more foreign. So to me, I go, the less touch you have with connecting with people in life, you have to fill it in other areas of your life. Otherwise it will be lonely. And that's what I love about the dance community is it is really tight knit for better and sometimes for worse, right? Like you have to understand how it works, but the best part of being so closely knit is what you just said. And there is no one else that's going to be closer connected, more interested, more similar like passions than the people who live and work and do life in dance.
Yeah.
And so to have a community, and that's where I think, taking that junction point and moving it towards like these kids, your goal in the studio should not just be a great dancer. You should be a great leader in how you connect with others because you have no idea where time will take you, what connections you may have in life. You should be building bridges, not burning them down.
That's so true. That's one reason why I love how, especially like the older kids, they get to be like sophomores, juniors, seniors in high school, and they start to assist classes or sometimes even have their own classes. And I think that's so nice because it's an opportunity right away while they're still a student for them to get to pour into, the little ones. And it's kind of like starts this full circle moment, which is exactly what I did, And that's, especially if you're someone who wants to be a teacher, that you're currently a student, it's a great way for you to continue. You're already pouring back into the community before you even left,
Yeah.
So
no, it connects the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Ecosystem. That's what I'm obsessed with, is like preserving, protecting, and nourishing this ecosystem. So when you have good mentors and you've got good students and parents that are in partnership with the studio and the goals and the vision and just the core values that we operate by, then with time and consistency, what you'll see is these things are being fabricated together. It's kind of like the mesh. I know people for 13, 14 years now, and it's like their kids were 3 years old when I met them, and now they're in high school. Yeah. And I mean, I was at an event for my oldest daughter, freshman year, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like bumping into old friends. People came to the studio, and I'm like, I can't believe it's been this many years. Yeah. And now we're doing life together in our kids' young adult years, like going into the high school years. And I'm like, what a cool thing that this community has provided, and dance was the mechanism to provide it. So like my goal again on these podcasts is to really share people is like, if you think your kid goes in, takes dance and leaves and goes home.
Oh, it's so much bigger than that.
Would you expand into that just from a teacher's perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think just talking about dancers in general, they are so versatile. We are some of the most hardworking, most disciplined people that I know. And it's because we've spent so many years, like even people that I went to school with who left dance, like they are, whatever they're doing, whatever, career path they chose, like obviously they're disciplined, they're hard workers, but beyond that, like their problem solving skills are just out of this world, and their critical thinking abilities and thinking on the spot. And you got to think about like, if you're, doing a dance and something goes wrong, you have to immediately like in the moment, what are we going to do? And that stuff literally will translate to, an older like situation of a work life. And so I think that it is way more than just the dancers coming to take class and going home. Like it might be that way in the beginning when they're just, new to it. But after a while, like there's lifelong friendships. There's so many experiences that we do. Like that's why I love community, events that happen within the studio. And especially those teen kids, they spend a lot of time together. Oh yeah. And they are, performing together, they're partnering together, they're building trust, they're building like all these skills that will go on for the rest of their life, whether they do dance or not, it doesn't matter. Like those are lifelong skills that I believe are, from a young age, like they're just kind of instilled into our brain, and we don't know any different other than to show up and be disciplined how we always have been. And that's such a good problem to have,
No,
so
I agree. I think, again, it builds a better community. Yeah. And that's that perspective that, when you bring your kid to dance, you're entrusting them with mentors. Yeah. Something they've spent decades, working on their craft, perfecting, struggling, developing, doing all these things. And they're filtering a lot of that and then providing your kid with this really cool perspective on what it takes to be like this. And you're right. Like there isn't a lot of things nowadays where you truly get away from technology and you're just present, like dance. So what I love when I'm like, all the kids, like all their phones are gone. When you're in the room, it's you, it's your teacher, it's your peers. It's the most old school thing we have left.
Yeah. Empty room with a mirror.
Yeah.
Can't sit down, let's go.
And nothing's more revealing than literally facing yourself every day. And for young girls especially, learning to develop the confidence to face yourself even when you're not producing the outcome that you want. Yeah. Because like any other sport teams and things you do, like you go out into a field, there isn't a mirror. Right. So you're not watching your mistakes in real time. And if you play a game like, you play volleyball, it's the points at the end of the game that determine the winner. You could have had 10 mess ups. Whereas in dance, if you're being judged, every mess up deduction brings you down. You can't like get those points back magically. You can't like come back and win it. Right. Like if you fell out of your dance and things didn't work, like, okay, it's done. You probably lost that competition because of those mistakes. Yeah. Whereas in sports, the sports arena, you're allowed to. Yeah. So it's a really different type of development. So I try and get parents to understand, like, when's the last time you worked in front of a mirror all day? Like, I know it's the spoken term. Like, what's the most like aggravating thing is like going shopping and like having to figure out what fits, what doesn't fit, and it's not the most comfortable of settings, but we're teaching these young girls now at a very impressionable age to go, I want you to look at yourself in the mirror and see the value of who you are. And we're going to continue to add on to that. So when days you don't feel it or days you don't see it, you're still making that progress in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right?
That's really good.
And now you go, okay, well, what's a young teenager look like who's confident but not cocky, humble but not like, pouty, right? And able to lead in today's kind of society. What does that look like? And to me, that means like you're separating yourself. So you go, man, dance is just one aspect of everything you're getting. And to the point you're making, you got these friends that are good critical thinkers or finding out how to solve things on the fly. Like dance requires that of you.
It does.
So to me, I might be biased, but I think dance is a place where you can develop a very strong mind and build a fortitude to like how to navigate not just like what you think of yourself, but what you see of yourself. And I mean, could you imagine like a mirror out on like the baseball field and like you're showing the pitcher every time like, hey, this is what you look like. This is the last pitch you did. This is what you look like.
Right.
That would be like nerve wracking.
It reminds me of the replays they do in slow motion.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people are like,
yeah. Gosh. But I'm going like, but in dance, you're like, I'm dancing and I'm trying to get what the teacher's telling me and I'm trying to do it right. And I'm working on like, that is so much pressure.
Yeah.
And it's a good pressure.
Yep.
Because it's developing you in ways that I don't really know anything else can. There's different ways, different sports, different activities. But I think what I love about dance is it fosters the creative soul.
Yeah.
And it teaches you how to think outside of the box, as they say. But when you learn how to collaborate and you create something beautiful as a team, like there you go. Like there's your there's your end goal.
No, it's so true.
Learning how to develop a concept that you present with value to people to enjoy while working with your peers and people you love by being schooled by your mentors. Like to me, dance offers so much more value than maybe people understand what it's being given in the process.
Yeah. You might not see it for, years later. Like it might take a while. And so sometimes it's not an instant turnaround to where like, oh, I see the fruit of my labor the next day or the same class. I'm like, we'll try again next week and the next week and the next week. And then all of a sudden it's been a year and 5 years and I see the change. And I'm like, imagine if I just would have skipped out here and skipped out there, like maybe I wouldn't have made it,
Yeah.
So,
well, and so, and I know there's a big, like, for people who don't like get the part they want. Mm-hmm. Can you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely experienced that, growing up, but I was more concerned with just, okay, I didn't get it for whatever reason, but clearly, like, I still have work to do. That was kind of my mindset of like, okay, well, I know that I'm not ready yet, but like, that means there's more to learn, you know? So I was just so focused on the more to learn part, that is what made me just wanting to be in class as much as I possibly could. Like I didn't want to ever skip class because I was like, I'm missing out on an opportunity to learn more that could get me to this point that I want to be,
Well, it's kind of like you have a microsecond to make a decision.
Yeah.
Is this going to like defeat you or is it going to make you more determined?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to express this enough, but like nobody gets everything they want and try for, especially the first time. And so like learning to teach kids how to cope with like, it doesn't mean that your efforts weren't valid, that you're not a great dancer. Like you can't sum it all up and you have to compartmentalize it and go, I worked hard, but I didn't get the outcome that maybe I wanted.
Yep.
Now I have to look at why. Like, why didn't I?
Yeah.
And can I ask myself honestly without hurting my own feelings? Yeah. Like, hey, did I get this? Did I not get this part because of like I didn't fulfill the role that I thought I was fulfilling. Right. But that moment, I mean, people don't make it and then they quit. And I'm like, man, what a sad end to a beautiful journey. And it'd be kind of like, well, I went to the gym yesterday. Oh, I didn't get my 6-pack yet. Put a lot of effort in. Yeah. In fact, I spent months. It's still not there.
Yeah, I like.
And then you're like, oh, I'm not seeing the result. Or again, you're in the fitness world, so like you're heavily involved.
I definitely. I think of it. I love the analogy of like it's a crock pot, not a microwave mindset.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like, especially now, these kids are so like, the instant gratification is just on another level.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, yes, like there's definitely times where I wanted something right now, but I feel like nowadays, even just few years later with these kids, it's so different, and they will take everything, like their emotions are just, they're running rampant. And so if they don't get a part, or like even the kids in class that I teach, if someone doesn't get to be the line leader, sometimes it's like, oh, their whole day's ruined, you know? And I'm like, I have to gently tell them like, hey, it's okay. Like there will be another chance to be the line leader. It's okay that you didn't right now, but here's why. Maybe it's because you were talking while I was teaching. Maybe that's why you didn't get to be the line leader. So let's try again next time. And then there's another chance, right? So that's a very simple example, but it's the same thing of like, if you're auditioning for your favorite part in the Nutcracker and you don't get it, like it doesn't mean that you're a bad dancer. Like it doesn't negate all the work you've done. It just means that there's more to go,
Yeah. I love that, and that's hard. And I think, again, I'm a parent of, 3 growing children, and it's like, I want to spare them the feelings of defeat, but at sometimes you can't.
Yeah. And,
I've always tried to be very objective with my kids to go like, same thing what you're saying, like you got to put the effort in, but it doesn't guarantee an outcome. Right. Just because you try doesn't mean you're not entitled
to anything.
In fact, the only thing you're entitled to is to try again.
Yep.
That's the one thing I can say. Hey, you're entitled to so much. You get to keep trying.
Yep.
Keep trying in life. Never giving up. Always pressing ahead. And I know going through COVID, oh my gosh, the amount of work, it took.
That was a time.
That was a time. We're all still recovering, right?
Honestly, yes.
The studios, as an owner, like, oh my gosh, the amount of like hidden work that no one will ever see or know.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't feel like I was conquering the day. It was like, all right, this is going to be painful. Let's figure out how to navigate shutdowns and online viewings and all that stuff. And like that type of struggle created a catalyst for so many other positive things that we've actually been able to bring into fruition. Mm-hmm. So in a weird way, I can look back and go like, man, I hate how I felt because of the COVID and the lockdowns and all that, but I love what it produced. And it was like, it produced strength in our team. And people that, took leadership positions and stepped up and really navigated through an unprecedented time. And I go, I got to see something really special out of our coworkers that I wouldn't have seen if we didn't go through it.
Oh, yeah.
So like on one end, you're like, yeah, would I want to go through that again? Nope. But making the best of it, being resilient and determined, and being the creative souls that we are. Like we just kept pivoting and adapting and adjusting, and it's like we're 23 going into 24 season, and this is like finally I feel like the arts community is still just beginning to heal, right? I
agree with that. Yeah.
So
I think it was definitely hard for me too, but at the same time, while it was hard and while I wasn't feeling 110%, I decided to use that opportunity to network a lot. Yeah. And honestly, like that's one reason that I'm sitting here, with you today. But it was a chance for me to really kind of like evaluate what I wanted out of dance, and just kind of like take a little bit of a shift. And I got some of my, my most fun jobs like birthed out of COVID, and some people that I have been able to work with since then that I just kind of networked with at the time, and then something came to fruition later. That all happened during the time of COVID. So it was a blessing in disguise. Yeah. Emphasis on disguise. Yes. But it was a blessing at the end of the day. So
I had an older friend and been in arts longer than I ever have. And she was like, artists thrive under pressure. The ones that are really resilient, like, some of the most tortured artists create some of the most beautiful work. And I'm like, can't it come any other way, Because I get it. Like the challenges we had to face required us such an extreme level of creativity so that we could be here today and be having this type of conversation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I get it. And I mean, I can look back now and be like, oh my God, like the things we came through. And then I look at the kids and go, wow, look what these kids have come through. So now we're navigating this new season of life with children that kind of missed out on a couple of years, developmental areas, and like you said, learning how to like show facial expressions again because they're so used to being masked or whatever it is they're going through. Job life at home with mom and dad, like everything's been disrupted crazily, and it just always I think that consideration always brings me back to my point that like when you're at the studio, you should feel at your safest. You might make a mistake in class today. No one should be ridiculing you. I mean, like, what a horrible thing to do. And, again, culture creates the habitat that we all live in, and you want to make sure it's a positive one. And I mean, you've visited all of our studios, so would you like to speak to our culture a little bit of what it was like for you, kind of coming as a complete outsider in?
Yeah, so I mean, I started out, I guess my first time subbing here was back in 2021, I think. Yeah, that was at Allen. So a couple years ago now. Yeah. And every time that I've been to all three studios at this point, but every time that I've come in, it's like I'm always greeted with a smiling face right away, which is not the case at every single studio. Yeah. And it's just like, okay, we're ready to go. This is where you are. Like, just a welcoming environment, first of all. Yeah. But then it's just a matter of like watching you guys thrive, having three separate businesses, but it's like one entity, but it's three, but it's one. And so that's been really fun because I feel like that's a lot of moving parts going on, and it's a big staff, and it's a lot to handle, but you guys do it so gracefully that it makes me think it's easy when I know it's not, but it, like, just looking at it from a person who's just a visitor, it's been fun. And I feel like it's been pretty seamless to come in and teach class and then, and I can imagine like, it's taken a while to build to that, Yeah. And you told me a little bit about the backstory of like starting all those studios, but my goodness, just having three like full well-oiled machines. I feel like that's the best way to describe it, and I just love it. I think it's great. I think that y'all have a really good thing going here. Thank you. It's been fun to get to experience like all the kids at all the different places, and everyone is just like doing their own job, but everyone has the same vision and the same mindset and the same like team mentality of like, we're all working for the greater good of DSN, whether we're Allen or McKinney or Frisco. So that's been really fun to see.
Well, that is awesome. That is really great to hear. And for me, like, I love to hear from outsiders. Yeah. Because it's one thing, like, we have our mantras and we have our ways, and but like the most truthful opinion can come from somebody who's completely objective, who's just like, I'm seeing this just as it is. Yeah. With no personal other connection other than coming in and do some work here with you. So for me, that's encouraging. I know our team will love to hear that. Yeah. And, again, it's building that network. That's the whole vision. Dance Studio Network is a network.
You guys truly are doing that really well. So
yeah. Well, thank you. And how about the kids? So as far as the culture of how these kids treat each other.
Yeah. I mean, I've pretty much had like every age range at this point, I think. I'm like thinking I've had the babies all the way to high school. So I feel like anytime I'm thinking to specific times where I've given like a team exercise or a group, prompt or whatever. Yeah. I've been really like intentional to watch how they work together, and it's been really sweet to watch that, especially the older kids, because sometimes that's the point where we're experiencing burnout sometimes, like we talked about, but they like, especially all summer long, I did that, and I was like, this is really sweet to see. It takes me back to my days when I was learning to first start choreographing, or I had a little assignment in class, like how did I do that, and like kind of seeing part of myself in them.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that's the ecosystem we're building, and that's what we want to continue to extend outwardly. And I think, we see a lot of things that aren't right in the world. We see all this stuff and everybody talks about it, but I'm like, just go be the change you want to see. Go be that first impression on how you want things to be versus waiting for someone else to come up behind you and do it for you. And, with dance culture, you're asking a lot of creatives to work together collectively in the same vision, but be like, for us, it's, it's like having three kids, but we're like one family, and they're all at different seasons of their life. They're always constantly changing. And that's like maybe it's why it's working really well. 'Cause I've got a kid in high school, one in middle school and one in elementary. And it's like, they all need completely different things at the same exact time. And they're trying not to compare each other, but they're comparing each other in some form. And like, to me, I like that healthy push, where I can see in the dance culture where it gets bad is like when kids start beating themselves up because they're not somewhere they think they should already be.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, if that's the case, then what do you need us for? You've already learned everything. Yeah. Then what are we doing here? Yeah. So like, why, like, how do we help break through that divide and just really bring these kids to a safe place in their mind to go, man, I'm here to learn. I'm here to enjoy this. Like, it's dance at the end of the day too. There's a lot of things you can do, but like, it's pretty hard to have fun and dance at the same time, right? Like an angry dancer, like I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but like generally speaking, like this is really fun. So becoming great at it as an artist, that takes time.
Yeah, it's a lifelong process. I mean, I always talk about lifelong learning, and I think especially teachers, it's really important that they continue to be students, because there's never...
Ooh, hold on, say that again.
Teachers should never stop being students.
Ooh, I love that.
Ever. Even the people that I take class from, like, I know that they're still taking class. You know what I mean? Like, I honestly, like, I try to not take class from people who still don't take class, because it's this thing of, like, we're all continuing to learn. Like, you will never, ever learn everything. You can't.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. And so you might get close, if you've been doing this for 50, 60, 70 years, but there's never a point where you won't have more to learn, ever.
Yeah. So. No, I love that. Well, this is awesome. Yeah. I love this conversation. Again, we want people to be a part. This is the real nitty gritty, like there's the vision of where you want to take it, but there's all the minutia that it takes to get there. So maybe some advice for some of the parents that have kids that are exploring, maybe wanting to take dance to the next level. What's some tips maybe you'd tell them?
Yeah. I think, well, I'm not a parent, so this is just me speaking from a teacher perspective. Yes. But I just think back to how my mom, kind of was with me growing up. And I would just say the biggest thing is, like, because my own journey, like, be patient, you got to be patient with the kids, because especially when they're young and they're, maybe they're trying soccer or cheer or basketball or whatever it is, like, it might take them a while, to figure out if they really love dance. And they might get to the end of high school and realize, hey, like, I think this was fun, but like, I don't want to pursue it professionally, and that's okay too. That doesn't mean that it was a waste, or like we talked about, those lifelong skills will transfer. But I think just being patient with them when they're young, they are impressionable, but like, they want to try everything. They want to say yes to everything, and you just can't like rush them in the process. So I think just being patient, and whatever, like, as they get older, whatever it is that they're kind of like gravitating towards, like, just be supportive of that. It might not be dance, and I feel like for me, I'm like hoping and praying that if I have a daughter, that she'll love dance, but at the same time, it's okay if she doesn't. Like, of course I'll give her that opportunity, but if she grows up and decides she wants to do something different, then that's okay. Like,
I love that. And that's like a really sweet version of what I would put bluntly is, don't vicariously live through your kids. Yes. I want to give you some little bit of a punch here. That was the best answer. I mean, really, like, be patient, let your kids, don't rush the process. But the hardest thing is, if you're trying to vicariously live through that extension of your kid,
they can feel that.
They can.
Know. Yeah.
They know.
Smart. There's so much more than we give them credit for sometimes.
Dude, kids are so perceptive.
Yeah.
Like, they know things. Like, I've always believed that, and I see that every day. Like, you're not pulling a fast one over.
Right.
But if you take that personal pressure off your student, what happens is that burden leaves them. Yeah. And now what's left is, like, their authentic selves. Yeah. And they might go in this direction, they might go another direction, whatever it is. Like, I believe as a parent, you're there to help guide them and support them and make sure that they continue to pursue it with everything that they love. And when it's hard, don't give up. I love what you said at the very start. Your mom didn't let you quit on the days you didn't feel good.
Yep.
And I think that's good tips. Like, just be there. Like, you're their number one cheerleader to, like, support your kid in doing. And like, my oldest is doing marching band, and oh my God bless her. She's out there like 107-degree heat.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, hey kiddo, like, I want to let you know, I know you're tired, you're exhausted, your legs are burnt, but like, you pulled one over. Like, I grew up in Southern California. It was never this hot out there. Yeah. So like, congrats that you pressed through.
Yeah.
And like that willingness to endure a short-term feeling can often lead to a long-term result.
Yeah.
And that in dance is like the essence of how it works, right? And some of the best performers and dancers that I know, like, oh my gosh, like, their early years were struggles, we're challenges, we're indifferent, and it wasn't just all easy peasy. Everything's, coming through nice and easy for them. But now you see what they've become, and you're like, wow. Now people are going like, well, how did you get that? Right? Because after you show somebody like where you like, oh my gosh, like, well, how did you do it? And like, oh my gosh, Jonathan, how'd you open all these dance studios? And I'm like, okay, like, how much do you want to die to yourself? Like, wait, what? I thought this was about me. It's like, no, it's not. It's not about me. Yeah. It's about the people I serve. And as artists who graduate from the dancer as a kid into adulthood,
such a journey.
And it's a transition. And like, I feel like I get to watch that a lot happen, which is wild, because you're like, oh, you're going from the young, all attention, all eyes on you, to then like the person who's supporting the next generation. And that's what we want to see in our community, is this healthy mentors leading the youth to be great leaders so that they can lead their generation too. Because I can't, my voice, my interests, my vernacular is going to sound much different than like a Gen Z or the upcoming Generation Alpha, which is trying to wrap my head around that one. Yes. My youngest is Generation Alpha. So I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know what their culture is going to be at that point. But I can't be their leader.
Right.
They have to be the leaders of their generation. So again, this is obviously jumping into the deep waters of dance, but I really 100% believe in my heart that like the decisions you make now as a kid can create a trajectory to the destinations you'll arrive as an adult. And if you don't compromise, don't give up, develop that resiliency. If dance is something that you want to do professionally, like you said, there's a place for you. Yeah. But you gotta want it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's easy, by the way. I mean, there is room there, but it doesn't mean that it's definitely not for everyone. And just because, you can do it, it doesn't mean that you have to. If your heart's not in it, like you're going to have a hard time. And you're probably going to want to quit pretty early on. And I feel like I always say to people, if you haven't ever wanted to quit, you probably haven't been doing this long enough.
Oh, that's good. I mean? Yeah, that's another good one. Yeah.
But yeah, you do have to love it. Like it's not just because there's room, it doesn't mean that it's just an easy breezy, path. So.
I love it. Well, I'll give you one last send off here before we conclude today. Any other things you'd want to shout out to anybody in the community or anything else on the mind?
I would just say show up and show up with a positive attitude, even if you're having the worst day of your life. Like show up positively. Show up. Never stop showing up. Yep. I
love it. Well, we'll take it from there. And until next time, we'll show up for some more great feedback from fellow dancers, professionals. Thanks for joining us today on the Dance Studio Network podcast. Again, Hannah Fisher, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, glad
to be here. This was fun. Looking forward to connecting more in this season ahead.
Awesome.